Outside of Georgia and Bama and Michigan and Ohio State, which team is the most likely to rise next to elite status and compete for the national title? Now, I've got to take exception with something that Randy said here. I'll do it in a second. The first one that came to mind, and these are teams that theoretically could do this, is of course USC comes to mind. Obviously, the biggest obstacle standing in their way is they need way better defensive talent. I mean, way better. And certainly they're in the process of doing that. They are at the very least one class, if not two classes, and portal. When I say class, I mean recruiting plus portal. At the very least 1 to 2 classes away from that. But I don't think I ever have to worry about the caliber of quarterback they're going to have. I don't have to worry about offensive skill talent. I still fully believe there is a Lincoln Riley national championship year somewhere out there. It just hasn't happened yet. But as we always say, there's a big difference between cannot and have not. So USC certainly, if we're looking down the road and there's this blank and a question mark, and someone's joining Tier 1 of college football, it's a guarantee. We just have to guess who. I think it would be foolish to overlook USC. This isn't me saying 2023 is the year it happens, although maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I would go USC. But I want to go back to the question for just a second. He said outside of, and then he listed some teams, and I'm assuming he's insinuating the teams he listed are already elite. And he said Bama and Georgia, got no problem with that. He said Ohio State, and for sake of argument, they're up there. But he said Michigan too. And I don't think Michigan's elite yet. I'm talking about over a sustained period, not prisoner of the moment. I don't think Michigan's elite. I think they're knocking on the door. I think they're right there. Probably, they're on the tarmac and the pilots come over the PA and they've said, "Hey, we're cleared. We're first in line for takeoff." But I don't think that they're on the runway yet. I don't think they're off the ground yet. And the reason I don't think that is because don't you have to have at least won a playoff game to be considered elite? Or have we lowered the standard for what that word means? Not on this show. So you could have a good argument with me about Ohio State too, but I'm looking at Michigan right now because there are still things Ohio State's done over the past few years that Michigan hasn't even done. But they're really close. The only thing that I think holds them back, see, they're in the really, really good category now. The only thing that I think would hold them back from entering that elite category is just roster talent. And I'm not looking at the team right now. I got to be very, very specific with what I'm saying. They got a really good team coming back. And I thought they were plenty good enough this year. I truthfully think they choked away a golden opportunity in that semifinal game. Just choked away a golden opportunity. But it happened, and we can't change that. Roster talent, I don't think held them back. But what I am thinking about is, as good as they are at evaluation and development, how different it would be if their overall roster talent was another notch up. If they were recruiting top 10 classes instead of top 20 classes. And my thought kept going back to, in that TCU game, even as bad as it went for them, what would adding 1 or 2 more elite athletes on that field potentially mean for Michigan? In other words, bail you out type players. Because there have been games, we've watched Georgia and Bama both do it, where they have not played a game where they're really worthy of winning, but they got so many good athletes running around that if you give them enough time to run around, they make things happen. Michigan's not quite at that level. And what I look at right now over the past 2 recruiting cycles is not only have they not been top 5-ish in recruiting, that's hard to do, they haven't finished top 2 in the Big Ten in the past 2 recruiting cycles. And I think they should be better than that. And I think to become a perennially elite team, they need to be better than that. Now, you should theoretically be seeing a big bump off of back-to-back Big Ten championships and back-to-back playoff appearances. And there's a school of thought out there. I don't really know if this is true or not, but there's a school of thought that Jim Harbaugh's flirtation with the NFL in back-to-back years has maybe dampened a little bit some of that momentum they otherwise would have gotten. Again, I don't know if that's true. That's a really, really granular thing that's hard to prove. But Michigan's, they're very, very close. So I'm nitpicking right now. But Michigan is certainly a team that should be in this conversation. LSU is a team that should be in this conversation. What separates them? Now, they're a little bit further away. Remember, we're talking about the word elite, And they overachieved this year, certainly. But to be elite, they also need to stack some more roster talent. They need to stack a couple of more classes on top of each other. They need offensive balance. They've got to be able to run the ball a lot better than they have the last several years. That's just upgrading offensive skill. They need more defensive depth, and I think they're well on their way to doing it. They are recruiting the way that you should. They're probably a couple of years away when you're stacking those kind of classes on top of each other. But if we're asking who could be elite in the next couple of years, all the arrows are pointing in the right direction, at least for them. And some of the concerns that some people had, I'm not one of them, but the concerns that some people had, that Brian Kelly, one of his secret struggles was going to be recruiting, not happening. Not happening. They got the number 1 portal class. They're top 10 in recruiting, so they're going to have the players. They're going to have them. And I've watched Brian Kelly, we all have, for a long time. He's not an underachiever. It is a great big myth that he underachieved at Notre Dame. I think he overachieved. The only time the guy was losing was when he faced more talented teams. That's essentially the only time. I thought some of the criticism of, well, he loses in the playoff all the time. He was in the playoff is the point. He had Notre Dame in the playoff. They're not supposed to beat Clemson. They're not supposed to beat Alabama. They're not as good as them. It would be an upset if he were to beat them. Anyway, that's the past. The future is he's at a place where he can match athletes in those future matchups with that caliber opponent. So I would look at LSU. We also have another submission here because I was kind and generous. Good Natalie Merchant album, by the way, or song. I was kind and generous enough to seek input from the Peanut Gallery earlier today. And so the Fighting Jessies of Penn State have made their way onto the list, and I have been given some talking points. And that's not necessarily saying that I disagree with what I'm about to say. I'm just saying, how should I put this? Jesse does have the power to take the show off the air. There is technically a button he could press in there right now, and we could disappear. And so I'm going to just read what he said. Penn State returns all 3 starting linebackers this year. They have 6 offensive linemen returning with 5+ games starting experience. Is that right so far, Jesse? Yes, right so far. They've got the best 1-2 running back combo in the Big Ten. I think Michigan would argue with that. Abdul Carter is going to warrant Defensive Player of the Year consideration. And it's Aller season. This concludes the list of points that producer Jesse wanted me to make about Penn State and how bright the future is there. Now, for the record, I'm kind of all in on Penn State. But I did want to read that as more a prepared ransom note statement than just my own unique thoughts. Also, I think we should mention Oregon here. Recruiting is heavily woven into any segment like this, and Oregon is recruiting as well as anyone is on the West Coast right now. Line of scrimmage talent is what they need to continue to upgrade. I say continue because they're already doing it. We've chronicled what they're bringing in on the defensive line via every acquisition method imaginable. Also, the offense, defense has to improve there. You know, we were talking about Brent Venables when he came to Oklahoma, and you said, if nothing else, defense will be better this year. Well, when Dan Lanning goes to Oregon, you think, well, if nothing else, defense is going to be really good this year. They weren't as good as I thought they'd be on that side of the ball. Now, what you don't know is what they learned about themselves. And I'm not just talking about what the coaching staff learned about their roster. I'm talking about what the coaching staff learned about the coaching staff. So you never know, year to year, whether there may not be some moves or decisions or changes in philosophy, subtle changes, that have a big impact. And it's a lot more than just did they get this player or that player. So I got Oregon, Penn State, LSU, Michigan, and USC. Those are the programs that I would look at. If you told me someone else is about to join the elite table in college football, that's where I'd go.
Thanks for watching, guys. Don't leave yet. Don't leave yet. Make sure you like the video and please subscribe to the channel. Not just for me, that's how we keep this entire thing free.